16th meeting of the Rayhnam Board of Selectmen. I just want to announce that pursuant to the Governor's March 12th order, over a year ago, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, and the Governor's March 15th, also more than a year ago, order imposing strict limitations on the number of people who may gather in one place, this meeting of the Rayhnam Board of Selectmen is being conducted with the public body members in person at Veterans Memorial Town Hall here on South Main Street in Raynham, and with the general public following the proceedings remotely. Every effort has been made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings, either by watching the Rayhnam Channel, by using the GoToMeeting feature, or by calling in as posted on the meeting agenda. Also, in accordance with the Governor's order, in attendance here, we have obviously our Board of Selectmen, Vice Chairman Joseph Pacheco, Selectman Richard Chavo, our Town Administrator Graham Waters, and our Health Agent Matt Tanis. With that, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would also like to mention that this meeting is being recorded by the Rayhnam Channel for us. With that, the first item on the agenda is the acceptance of minutes. Could I have a motion to accept the minutes of the March 2nd, 2021 meeting as printed?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Chavo, second by Mr. Pacheco. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. And if I could have a motion to table the minutes of the March 9th meeting for 1 week?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Chavo.
Second.
Second by Mr. Pacheco. Any
Aye.
discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Under department heads, we have, as mentioned earlier, our health agent, Matt Tanis, with us. Please give us an update on what's going on, Matt.
Yes, good evening, Board. I'd like to start with a brief COVID-19 update. So right now we're currently in phase 3, step 2 of the reopening plan, and tentatively phase 4, step 1 will take effect on Monday, this coming Monday, March 22nd. Again, it's provided that the public health data continues to trend in a positive direction, as it has been for several weeks now. We're updating the health department's website with all the new guidance documents as they become available for the change in phases. As far as COVID cases within town, as of this afternoon, we've had a total of 1,391 total cases, 84 deaths, 1,274 reported recoveries, and 164 probable or suspect cases. And we are just a few days away from our 1-year anniversary of our first COVID positive case in town here, so I can't believe it's been a whole year. But hopefully we continue to trend in the right direction as the weeks and months go on. In regards to the vaccine, I just found out just before the meeting that the governor is going to be releasing an updated vaccine eligibility schedule tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. And just we have just about finished up administering our second doses for the clinics we had held back in February for the 75 and up clinics that we held. It's been a little problematic getting second doses. We finally today received the remaining 20 that we needed. Did work with Health Express on 44. They were able to obtain a few extra second doses, which we had sent some of our residents to. So I'd just like to thank Health Express on 44 for their assistance. And definitely a big thank you to the Raynham Fire Department for the assistance in getting the vaccine administered during all of our clinics, past and going forward, of course, too. On Friday, we announced that we're going to actively be seeking vaccine for homebound residents within town. As part of this process, the Health Department, along with the Council on Aging and Fire Department, will be compiling a list of names of eligible homebound individuals over the next couple weeks so we can get a better count so we know what to ask for vaccine from the state. The information for the homebound eligibility is on the website, but in order to be eligible, a person cannot be able to travel to a vaccination clinic or site due to physical restrictions. They cannot reside in a nursing facility or rest home. They cannot be temporarily homebound, so if they'd be able to get a get to a vaccination clinic in the next few weeks, they would not be eligible. And not capable of leaving home for routine medical appointments without the assistance from at least 2 people or an ambulance. Of course, if anybody knows anyone or has a family member, or you yourself are somebody who is considered a homebound person, or if you think you might be eligible but not 100% sure, just give our health department office a call, 508-824-2766. We'll put you on the list. I don't know the exact time frame for when we begin the vaccine, but I anticipate it being the next few weeks. So, the Rayhnam Housing Authority partnered with us at the health department. They have a specific separate program regarding vaccinations for everybody at the Housing Authority. We received the vaccine for their clinic today, and we'll be holding their clinic this Thursday. So I look forward to finishing up the Housing Authority. And just with the regional clinic sites, we've been in discussion with the Fall River and Taunton regional clinic site, as well as the Bridgewater State University site. Both sites have submitted draft proposals to the Mass Department of Public Health. And we're just awaiting to hear back from the state if they're going to be approved. And this afternoon, that the state did say that it may be a few weeks before we hear anything back on approvals. So as soon as we get one up and running, it'll be eligible for all Raynham residents to go as well, whoever's eligible at the time. Moving on, aside from COVID, so you've had an issue with AirSource and orders there. As I discussed a couple weeks ago, we had issued a public health nuisance order regarding the odors, and shortly after that, the Mass Department of Environmental Protection issued a cease and desist on the plant and its operations. The plant itself has not been operational since February 22nd, when that cease and desist went to effect, and communication with Mr. Kelly, Bob Kelly. At this time, they do not plan on reopening the plant until all the stockpiled material, which is substantial, has been removed off-site. I know we've still been getting a few complaints regarding odors. There still will be odors, even though the plant's not operational, just due to the volume of stockpiled Type 1 sludge product that is on the property of Raynham Park. I know Mr. Kelly's working on a plan to remove it, and the DEP is also working with Mr. Kelly to get a better time frame and order out to get that material removed. So stand by, and hopefully we'll have a better answer in the next week or two. And permits, based on our fall permits, I know just with COVID going on and a lot of uncertainty, we had a 93% return rate at this point from what we had last year total. Certainly some of those establishments that, mainly food, that did not renew yet. A good number of them are seasonal, like food trucks that were at Crew Brew. So we may be getting more in as we go forward. We had a couple establishments close. We had 2 Honeydews establishments close, and Friendlies, of course. Both Honeydews have now had another business go in. The one on 44 is Aroma Joe's, and the one on 138 is the Barrels and Boards Marketplace. The Friendlies, there's some discussion regarding a possible Starbucks going in there, so that percentage will only go up as we go forward. We received notification from the Bristol County Mosquito Collaborative that they're going to be doing some aerial larvicide spraying, as they do every year this spring. Usually that takes place in the end of April, early May. They don't have exact dates yet because it's all weather dependent, but as we get those dates, we'll put a notice out to the public. And then just last thing, I know it's also on the agenda under new business, but just town hall reopening. I don't know if you want to discuss now, or I can. Sure. Okay. So just looking at the public health data and the fact we're moving into hopefully, phase 4. I would certainly be open to consideration of reopening town hall, similar to what we had done in the fall with 2 days a week, probably Mondays and Wednesdays. See how that goes. Make sure that our public health data continues to trend in a positive direction. So I'll leave that for further discussion, but I think that's an acceptable move if the board were to so choose. That'd probably be looking probably in April, early April.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions, Mr. Pacheco?
No, I mean, Madam Chair, if we want to take this out of order, I'm fine to act on the town hall opening now. I would propose the week of April 12th. It would give our staff a month's notice to prepare for that, and obviously for us to, as management, put any other safeguards in place that we might need to put in between now and then. And that's still prior to when the next round of taxes are due, which is where we were getting some, at least I was getting feedback relative to constituent concerns, so.
And are you recommending the 2 days a week?
Yeah, I'm fine with the 2 days a week. I think that's a good start, and we can see where it goes. But I also, again, don't want to rush it and make sure staff have time to adjust and prepare, so.
Okay, Mr. Pacheco, do we have a second? Do you want to second that for discussion, Mr. Shavo?
No discussion. I think it's a good, I think it's well designed.
Okay.
Let's give people the time to acclimate, but I think we need to get on that track. I think most people that I talk to after a year of this are pretty much run out of steam. So I think we're on the right track by moving in this direction, and we have to continue to look at opening up the facility for business as usual, normal. So I second the motion.
Okay, any further discussion? Mr. Chanis, if you could coordinate with Mr. Waters as far as to make sure if there's any other accommodations that need, to be made to get ready for that.
Absolutely.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? So voted. Thank you.
Madam Chair, just for the record, reopening town hall 2 days a week, same as we were previously. I believe it was
Mondays and Wednesdays?
Mondays and
Monday and
Wednesdays?
Yep.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
With the starting date of April 12th.
April 12th, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
very good.
Thank you.
We'll
Any other
ensure-
questions from Mr.
None.
Chanis?
No.
Okay, we're all set then. Thank you for your report, Max.
Thanks, man.
Okay, next we had Linda Brackett, our animal control officer. We are going to postpone that until next week. We have an appointment of our animal inspector, and this is a annual appointment by the, and we need to notify the state of this. And appointment will run from May 1st, 2021 until April 30th, 2022. Current inspector is Kevin Marrera, resident of Hall Street in Raynham. I don't believe we have anyone else that's interested in the position.
Not this
You want
time.
to make a motion?
Motion to reappoint.
Motion to reappoint by Mr.
Discussion,
Pacheco.
please.
Second?
We do have another person that's interested, and
Oh.
so I'm not clear on if we do approve this, are we locked in for the year?
No,
Because,
he could resign if he were to want to at some point.
I thought there was consideration for Mr. Mayor moving into the CERT responsibility, which would certainly take him out of the animal inspector. But we do have another person that could fill that role, and that is the person who just resigned from an assistant CO, but she is readily available to do the animal inspection, and she's acclimated in the town, and that's Riley
Morgan, I think.
Riley Morgan. And I would say, honestly, we would save a step because Kevin is moving in the other direction. Why go to the state with Kevin and then pull back? I would say I will nominate Riley, who I've talked to directly, and who is capable of doing the animal inspector. She has the time for that. And it would be under the same conditions and exact circumstances as what Kevin Marrera does. So there's no change there.
I'm wondering, Mr.
Go
Shavo,
ahead.
if Mr. Pacheco would be willing, if maybe we could table it for
Sure.
a week?
Oh,
Because
sure.
I think they're going to
Yep.
do interviews
Yes.
for the search position.
Yeah,
so-
I'd withdraw my motion and motion to table for
Good.
up to
Second.
2 weeks.
Okay,
Yep, thank
motion
you.
to table, because we don't need to notify them until April 1st,
Fine.
so we're good.
So good.
Okay.
Yep.
So all in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Okay, very good. And if it's, the board is amenable, I'm wondering if we want to move up the discussion relative to the Collins Center Organizational Human Resources Review. It
That's
might
fine
be
by
a
me.
lengthy presentation to give adequate time for
Fine.
that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's a
so we'll
critical
move
item.
that up, and this is under new business, discussion and/or action, Collins Center Organizational and Human Resources Review. This is a lengthy document that has been prepared for us. The board members have received a copy of this, and I believe Elizabeth Corbo, who was the primary on this project, is going to join us remotely. Ms. Corbo, are you with us?
I am.
Thank you for joining us. Ms. Corbo, do you want to maybe first give us a little background about how you went about your study?
Absolutely. Thank you to the board for having me present tonight to discuss this report. The Collins Center certainly appreciates being invited to Rayhnam. During this process, we interviewed over 25 department heads, volunteers, employees, committee, and board members. We reviewed numerous documents, including town bylaws, the government study recommendations, town audits, policies, procedures, and the Division of Local Services report that was also done. The process, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Making sure my volume's okay.
Yes.
Okay. As well as, speaking with members of the board and the town administrator. So essentially, that's how we gathered information. We try to speak to as many people as we can, and we try to review as many relevant documents as possible. We were, first of all, so impressed with the level of devotion and care that employees, elected officials, committee members express towards the town. The dedication and service that Rayhnam has is to be commended, and frankly, something that's not often seen in public service. After going through this process, we compiled a report, and you have that in front of you. It's a lengthy report, and it contains a number of recommendations. The charge essentially was to look at some efficiencies that could be gained in operations and specifically with HR as well. So those recommendations are geared to address those efficiencies. I don't want to go through them all, only because there's approximately 50 pages there for you. But some of the key ones that we recommended, I can highlight and we can discuss any that you would like. But some of the key ones include codifying the responsibilities of the town administrator in special act or bylaw. Currently, those responsibilities have only been defined in his job description, so we would recommend that there be an official act that codifies the changes in responsibility to a strong town administrator. We recommend moving towards a more vertical and centralized department level structure, and we've given an example of that in the report in a proposed organizational chart. It's just an example for the board to look at, but it gives you an idea of some of the discussions that you could have about your organizational structure. One of these recommendations we know that you're already, well, several of these I believe you're already working on. We recommend that you look at hiring a finance director and an HR professional to deal with those very complicated issues. Those are really high-level positions and department-level positions that will provide some accountability within the town, and a reporting structure should be helpful and professional.
It doesn't look in this room.
Okay.
Another recommendation that we made is that the town engage in a classification and compensation study, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. But of course, there are also recommendations about updating policies and procedures for the town. You have a largely unionized workforce, but for those that are not unionized and some policies and procedures that are legal requirements, you would want to look at possibly updating those. So that would be an important recommendation as well. But the classification and compensation study is something that, after interviewing everyone and going through some of the town's procedures, would really be of a benefit. It updates job descriptions for any position included in the compensation and classification study, and then it performs a market analysis of the comparable salaries for those positions, so that you can create a structured compensation schedule for your employees, whoever's included in the compensation study. We would recommend that you start thinking about perhaps at the department head level. as your other employees, many are unionized. So that's just a highlight of some of the recommendations. I know it is a lot to go through. I'm happy to answer any questions or talk more in depth about some of the recommendations that are made. Overall, I think that this is well on its way to accomplishing many of these goals. And they're certainly achievable with the dedication that the Board of Selectmen and the Town Administrator has shown in its efforts to really look at the town. You have a very strong financial position in the town that is, you need to be commended for your financial management of Rayhnam. And sometimes when that's the case, towns tend to, maybe not look at their operational structure because the necessity isn't there. They're not being ordered to, they're not being directed to. The initiative that the Board of Selectmen has shown by engaging in this study, as well as the government study committee that they convened and the Division of Local Services report, is really to be commended. The fact that you're willing to engage in these conversations and really learn about different ways of doing things is a service to the town.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Corvo. I'll go to question. We're having some technical difficulties. I apologize.
No, what happens, Madam Chair, is it goes to whoever's speaking.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Mr. Pacheco, do you have any questions?
I have no questions for Libby. I would say, Madam Chair, the sections of the report that I think would be appropriate if the chair agrees to have discussions on in an executive session. It's obviously an extensive report. It's about 60 pages long. Some of the things, as Ms. Corbo mentioned, we're working on. Some things I have my personal opinions on, as I'm sure the three of us do. But overall, it's a comprehensive report that I've read twice. I also had the opportunity to talk to Ms. Corbo in between us receiving the report and this meeting, and I certainly appreciate her taking the time giving an overview to the board this evening. But no other questions. Again, I would just say that I do have some comments that I think would be more suited for executive session.
Mm-hmm. Do you request that executive session for this evening?
I would, Madam Chair, if the board's amenable.
Okay, for the reasons stated on the agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Chavo, questions of Ms. Corbo?
Well, if the motion is to discuss the specifics in executive session, I have no problem with that. I will just echo the comments that she generally made, which is obviously the report touches many areas. It's very comprehensive, all the way from vertical integration to structure, I should say, to appointed versus elected, more structured employee relations, codify the TA's responsibilities. So there are many dimensions to that study, and I think overall they did an excellent job of gathering data. And I think that the questions that I would like to deal with, along with Selectman Pacheco, related to the go-forward plan. But as far as the background goes and the specifics, I think very well thought out.
Okay, thank you. It is a very comprehensive report. Just a couple of things, and as Mr. Pacheco alluded to, there are different issues that people have different opinions about. But I would just like to ask you, Ms. Corbo, if one of the recommendations that you have is to consider increasing the Board of Selectmen to a 5-member board, and that is going before the town meeting. So I wondered if you could just maybe discuss some of the pros and cons that you feel are relevant to that.
I'm sorry, I am straining to hear, but was this regarding the consideration that of increasing the board to a 5-member board? Is that what you had mentioned?
Yeah, exactly, Libby. Because it's going to be going before a town meeting as an article, I think it would enlighten people. If you just want to give us maybe some of the pros and cons, I know you outlined them very well here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are hesitant to make a recommendation. The recommendation is that it be considered.
Right.
It's certainly a community decision, but in a community the size of Rayhnam, it is somewhat unusual to have a 3-member board. I think, we try to include a local survey that we did of some comparable communities, and I believe only one other of those comparable communities does operate with a 3-member board. You know, some of the pros of increasing to a 5-member board, you know, it gives you a little bit more flexibility in terms of scheduling meetings and reaching a quorum. It provides greater representation of Rayhnam residents, which is important, or, you know, the town might find important. It encourages increased civic involvement. It allows for 2 members of the board to serve on subcommittees, and it also allows a greater involvement generally in the board. You can only spread yourself so thin. So by having 5 members, you certainly can have the flexibility to branch out and have representatives on different committees if the board would like to do that. You know, the cons of a 5-member board, the open meeting law prevents discussion between a majority of members about business outside of meetings. So if you have a 5-member board, conceivably 2 members could be discussing things outside of meetings. So, you know, one of the cons that is often raised is that it could decrease transparency of deliberations. Having more members of the board might make meetings longer and less efficient. You receive a stipend, and as such, that could increase the cost of having additional board members by your stipend or your health care costs. So those are just some of just an overview. There are, of course, more issues involved. But again, for a town Rayhnam size, it is more common to have a 5-member board than it is to operate on a 3-member board. Again, it's about a community decision, it's about community representation, and what works best for Rayhnam. But again, that is something that is unusual, and it was something that was raised, I believe, by the Government Study Committee. So we addressed it in this report.
Okay, thank you. You also make mention of a step of consider making elected officials, boards, and committees appointed. Could you address that in a little more detail?
Well, one of the things that we look at is efficiency and accountability in positions. And Rayhnam does have, you know, a good amount of elected committees. Your town clerk is elected as well for town officials. And when there is a position that has significant responsibilities that require some level of accountability, we always make the recommendation that the board evaluate whether or not this is something that should be appointed or elected. Obviously, there's different levels of accountability for both positions, elected and appointed. When you have a position that has a significant amount of statutory responsibilities that are required to be fulfilled, that might be a position that you would want to look at making appointed rather than elected, to have that daily accountability or method for daily accountability rather than waiting for an election cycle to occur and having that election type of accountability for that position. We include a chart in this review for some considerations that you might want to think about for each position. But again, it is a little bit difficult to manage employees and positions where their authority is elected. For having efficient operation of town government, one of the things that you want to look at is centralized authority. When you have authority coming from various elected boards and committees, it can create a very diffuse system of accountability. And for some positions, that's not a problem. For other positions, where you need daily accountability for their job tasks, it becomes more of an issue. So we would advise that you revisit those positions and consider whether or not it might be better served as being an appointed position rather than an elected position. And you can also see a little bit of that in the organizational chart that we provide. You can see how reevaluating some of those elected committees, boards, positions would look as appointed positions within the town, whether they're appointed by the town manager, the town administrator, or they're appointed by the board of selectmen.
Okay, thank you. As you mentioned, there are a number of items mentioned that we've already taken action on, which is very good. Ms. Corbo, would you be available for the meeting, the executive session following this meeting?
Certainly, I can make myself available for that.
Okay, we can give you a call.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, if I could, just one other thing, Ms. Corbo. When you talk about some of these changes, I think it's important to highlight, you said they're community decisions. It's not about best practices. There's nothing out there that says doing X, Y, or Z is about best practices, but I just want to highlight that because when you read a report like this, sometimes it can be confused as to what's being implied. Can you just confirm that for us?
Yes, and specifically, if I can interject, we try to be clear when something is a best practice versus a community consideration. A community consideration would be a 5-member board versus a 3-member board. A best practice would be recommendations regarding updating your policies and your procedures. So where we make a recommendation that something be considered, that is really more of a community decision. And where we make a recommendation that something is a best practice, like updating policies, I would even say engaging in a classification and compensation study for your department head, that would be a best practice to have a set compensation schedule for those individuals who are not part of union contracts. That would be a best practice. But in terms of, things, policy decisions for the town, like the membership of the board, or the composition of the board of selectmen, that's really a community decision versus a best practice.
Good, thank you, Madam Chair.
Anything else, Mr.
That's it.
Pacheco? Anything else, Mr. Shavo?
Just one thing. I know that we'll be discussing in more detail in executive session, but I want to put one point out while we're still on open meeting, and that is there's, in my mind, a dissonance between arguing for a 5-member board because of more representation, and in the same report, many pages that recommend more appointees and less elected. So I think we really need to reconcile the benefit of elected selectmen versus appointed people throughout the town. That to me needs to be flattened out a little bit.
Okay. And as Libby mentioned, that's a community decision, and it will be decided by town meeting. There's an awful lot here, and I think we take this under advisement in addition to meeting an executive session following the meeting. Libby, thank you very much, Ms. Corbo, and we will be in touch and with you later in the evening. Thank you.
Could I make one closing remark?
Oh, please, yes.
Again, I can't emphasize enough how wonderful it was to speak to all the members of the town hall, the employees there. Really, and many have spent years as residents there, and their love for the town, as well as the board of selectmen and some board volunteers and committee volunteers, was just so impressive. You have a great team in Rayhnam, and you're very fortunate. It was very impressive to talk to everyone there, and the level of knowledge and expertise that people bring to the table is really, it's really unusual, and it's a true gift that Rayhnam has.
Thank you. Yes, we have a lot of community spirit here in Raynham, for sure. Thank you, Ms. Corbo. I'm sorry, Mr. Waters, was there any questions you wanted to ask before
No,
we let
fine,
you go?
thank you.
Okay, all right, terrific. Okay, then returning to the regular order of business, completion of old continuing business, discussion and action, town administrator's evaluation format. As Mr. Waters explained, we had a form. I think you had proposed it last year, and this is something we do in April. I think along with what we did last year, we asked the town administrator to prepare a report for us that we can use as part of our evaluation, outlining what you think has been accomplished, Mr. Waters, in the past year, what your goals are and objectives are, and so forth. Beyond that, Mr. Pacheco, I'll open it to you.
Yeah, I just am looking for the board to make a determination tonight if we're going to use that same tool as we did last year, or if the board wants to adopt something else. Obviously, it's something I spent a significant amount of time working on last year, and I was comfortable with it, but I will defer to the two of you if it's something you're comfortable with, or if we're going to change it. But, you know, we're 2 weeks out of April, and we have to get this settled, so.
Okay, I think it had enough flexibility that, you know, you could say what you wanted to say, but Mr. Chavreau, you haven't had a chance probably to look at it.
Yes, I did, actually.
Okay.
I met with the town administrator today, and he was efficient enough to give me a copy, and I have looked at it. There's quite a bit to it. It's, you know, there's a lot of detail in there, and I don't have any problem with it. I think at the end of the day, what we're looking at is the accomplishments that the town administrator made, and his report last year, I think, summarized that very well. So I'm okay with the plan as it exists now.
Okay, sure. As I said, I think it has enough flexibility so that you can, you know, make the comments that you feel are appropriate, for sure. So, do we need a vote, or just an understanding?
I just think an
Pacheco?
understanding, as long as there seems to be a consensus, so that's good for me.
That's
Okay,
fine.
terrific. All right, so if you can work on that report for us, Mr. Waters, we would appreciate that. We are also going to table the report on the Whippoorwill Drive dog incident for next week's meeting. Discussion of Council on Aging and VSO clerk positions. We have two positions that are opening, through resignations. One is the clerk in the Council on Aging, and the other is the clerk position, also open through resignation for the Veteran Services Officer. And I know Ms. Brito addressed us on that last couple of weeks ago, perhaps, may have been last week. And I don't know if Michaela is out there, if you want to comment on that, Michaela?
Yep.
I am, ma'am.
Yeah, please, Michaela.
I have spoken with several people offline, and on my job description, we had put that it was going to a union position. And speaking with several people, it needs to be a classified position and not a union position due to the fact of confidential information, not only in my office, but also in the Selectmen's office. So I would be willing to go ahead and have that removed. Secondly, I know that we had been talking about monies being in the budget as far as hiring somebody at the time. But I still have funds there for personnel due to the fact that Mrs. Montagne did retire back in November. So I haven't had to pay her salary for at least the past 4 months.
Okay.
But in speaking about Mrs. Montagne, I have reached out to her to talk to her to see if she would like to come back. And she is going to think it over, but she said that she needs a little bit more time to think about it.
Okay.
And in speaking with both, with all three, with Graham, with Mr. Pacheco and Mr. Chavreau, the SAVE person, there might be an opportunity to have the SAVE person come in to assist me, but that would be only for filing, and even with that, I need to be conscious of who comes in because of the fact of confidential information.
Right. The clerk's position would be, certainly deal with confidential information. A SAVE volunteer might be able to assist you with some other tasks, for sure. Gentlemen, thank you, Michaela. Any questions?
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Pacheco?
I'm fine moving forward with both of the positions as they were when they were vacated by the incumbent. And if there's need for additional support, then I would strongly urge the board to utilize SAVE volunteers. We have this program on the books for a reason, and I think we owe it to the senior taxpayers to utilize it.
Absolutely. We love volunteers here in Rainham. Is that a motion, Mr.
That would be,
Pacheco?
yes.
Just a discussion,
Mr.
just if I
Chavreau,
may.
yes.
I take Michaela's point very well, which is that there's a training transition that has to be dealt with, so we need to deal with that, but I certainly agree with Selectman Pacheco's point. Once we put in place somebody that has been trained so that there's an efficient way to go, we can add additional support through the SAFE program so that we can level off the requirement that way. But I think that, you know, the VSO needs both of those in order to perform the job.
Sure, certainly our veterans and our seniors are deserving of all the assistance we can give them.
So with that discussion, I'll second the motion.
Second, any further discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes,
Quick
Mr.
question.
Pacheco,
Is it
Mr.
the
Waters.
intent of the board to have for the Veterans Agent Administrative Clerk the same hours and salary as Ms. Montagne was paid?
Continue with the...
My motion was as it was when the incumbent vacated the position.
Very good.
And that if we need to supplement with additional help, we look to say volunteers.
Correct.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Thank you, Michaela.
I was going to add one thing, but that's okay.
Oh, do you want to? Please, go ahead.
And I totally forgot now.
Well, you can always call us back.
I know what it was, ma'am. Previously, there was no true job description for Mrs. Montagne. Before, she was just coming in to assist Mr. Montagne with clerical stuff. So, I mean, that job description is what a lot of the other VSOs across the Commonwealth have, and I actually trimmed it down from some of what the larger areas have and then combined it with some of the smaller ones. So that is something that was not there before. So I just wanted to make sure that that was made aware.
Okay. Perhaps we could have a copy of that to review and,
Yep.
and as we approve that to formalize that. Thank you again, Michaela. Okay, next on our agenda, we have our Human Resources Coordinator, discussion and action. At our meeting, last week, we interviewed 2 excellent applicants and discussed how I think we would be fortunate to hire either one. We thank the search committee for doing a commendable job for interviewing and bringing 2 excellent candidates before us. And as I believe I've heard from a couple of people, we're going to be a winner regardless of which direction we go. So I know we left it last week that we would review, and hopefully we've had a chance to do that. And I throw it out to you 2 gentlemen. Did either of you change your mind? I would like to see a unanimous vote. I think that's important.
Madam Chair, I'm still where I'm at. I think the comments I made last week would remain relevant this week, that I would echo your comments and that of the committee that 2 finalists were very well suited for the position, and we would be fortunate to have either. I did believe, and I do believe that based upon the comments I made last week, the education, the relevant experience with labor relations, the longevity in the field, coupled now with good reference checks, that to me the overwhelming candidate would be Ms. Usher Johnson.
Okay. Mr. Shavo.
Yes, I'm going to make it unanimous with the person that Kelly I referred to. And I think one of the salient points that have transpired this past week are the references that have added another dimension to our understanding of their backgrounds. It is absolutely clear that either one of them are super qualified. It's a very tough decision, very close. But in the interest of representing all of the data and having a uniform perspective, I will second the motion of Mr. Pacheco.
Okay, thank you. And under discussion, I am going to agree with both of you gentlemen. I think the point you made, Mr. Pacheco, about her experience with union issues is important. And also the fact that in a previous job, she did come into a situation where there was no HR department whatsoever, and she was able to manage that very well. And she is, again, coming in here with no particular HR experience in our town. So I think that's very important, too. So I will do a roll call vote. Mr. Pacheco?
Yeah, aye.
Mr. Shavo?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it is unanimous vote. But Mr. Waters, would you please send also the other applicant a letter of appreciation for coming forward? We greatly appreciate her efforts, and we were very impressed. It's just a slight difference between the two that we're going in the direction we are.
Madam Chair, if I could, I'd just add, it would be continued upon successful contract
This is
negotiations.
absolutely true, yes, definitely. That should be part of the motion as well.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Let's see. Next, we've already discussed opening town hall, town audit, RFP, and recommendation. Mr. Waters?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The board received in their packets on Friday, as well as tonight, a recommendation by myself and the treasurer collector, who met on February 19th and March 5th to review and discuss proposals submitted by various auditing and accounting firms in response to the town solicitation for auditing services. There are 4 bidders who submitted, and 2 met the minimal qualifications to be considered. The treasurer collector and I reviewed the proposals, and based on our decision in part of criteria which was included in the RFP, of the 4 firms that applied, 2 met the minimum criteria. They both excelled at technical review and both had great references. The 2 final firms were Powers and Sullivan and Melanson, formerly Melanson and Heath. Melanson put in a bid for $45,500, and Powers and Sullivan put in a bid for $29,000. Powers and Sullivan also had mentioned a few other complimentary items they have done for other clients, including attending a town meeting, which was a nice surprise, to explain to the residents the idea of OPEB liability. They also specifically mentioned that the $29,000 was all-inclusive, and any additional projects the town may request would be estimated before engaging the town with the work. So it's for those reasons that the treasurer collector and I are recommending the town engage with Powers and Sullivan for auditing services for fiscal year 21, 22, and 23 audits, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. Do we have a motion, gentlemen?
I'll have a motion in a minute. Just one question, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Mr. Waters, is it $29,000 per year, or is there an escalator clause?
No, it's per year.
Okay. Madam Chair, I'd motion to accept the recommendation and appoint Powers and Sullivan.
Do we have a second, Mr.
Second the
Shavo?
motion.
Any discussion?
None.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous vote. Thank you very much.
Good job.
Next, we have Land Acquisition Conservation White Street Land. This was came to us a letter from a resident. I don't know if he happens to be online, if he would like to address this or not.
I am.
Yes, Jerry.
Yes, good.
Jerry
Can you
Gibbs.
hear me?
We can hear you, Jerry. Yes, absolutely. Can we just have your name and address for the minutes?
I'm just, it's a little delayed on the audio, so that's what I wanted to make sure. I know that in regards to the land that I was questioning about the White Street property, they took it off the market during the last few days. But it raises an interesting question for the town, and I wanted to share a few thoughts and what we've heard on the Rayhnam residents page regarding this property and open space and conservation in general in the town. When the property was for sale, it's been for sale for off and on for the last couple of years. There was 100 acres over there that, when you look at it from, a satellite, it's almost part of an emerald necklace here in Rayhnam. It goes from Hewitt's Pond to Tracy Pond to Johnson Pond. If the property does come up for sale again, it's such an important piece of land that many people in the town want town officials to really look at it and investigate ways that we can preserve that land in the future. One of the things that I've learned about is an open space and recreation plan that needs to be submitted to the state. And folks that I talked to said that Rayhnam doesn't have such a plan. Could anyone answer that for me? Do we have an open space and recreation plan that's registered with the state?
Mr. Gibbs, we have one. I don't know what you mean by registered with the state, because I think all we do is submit them. It's similar to a master plan. I'm not aware of any state or federal law that requires one, but I know we did have one. I can't tell you when it was created, though.
Okay, yeah, I don't think it's required, but for instance, let's say that land became available, or land similar to that we wanted to preserve in town. They said that if we don't have something registered with the state, we wouldn't qualify for grants. So for instance, in this White Street property that we've been talking about online for the last couple of weeks in the Rayhnam residence page, some grants could pay for half of that. If we had an open space and recreation plan submitted, we could apply for grants, and many people told me that upwards of 50% of the funds to purchase land like that would come from state grant money. But they also said that if we don't have something submitted to the state on record, on file, we couldn't go for those grants. Now, I haven't sat down and found out if all that is true. I'm just kind of sharing what I've been learning a little bit as I investigated this. The other thing about this particular property, and it's something that I think we in the landowner, if the town could talk to the landowner, there's supposedly old growth forest on this land. Old growth forest may not sound like a big deal, but the only old growth forest in the entire state of Massachusetts is on Wachusett Mountain. And I've talked to a number of groups up and down the East Coast regarding old growth, and they said it would be a remarkable find if there is old growth east of Wachusett Mountain. And I would hope that the landowner is aware of that significance and would work with the town to either, let us confirm that, or again, working with the town. I think we want to be proactive here on this property. If you look again at a satellite photo, it's the last bastion of preservation land in the center of town. Everything around it is surrounded by houses and industry. At the strategic planning meetings, which I know you guys are pretty familiar with, the open space and conservation was the #1 polling data that's been coming out of those meetings so far. So it's a protecting of our very valuable conservation land that I think has all of us wanting to take a proactive stand. And I just wanted to hear what you guys thought on the Board of Selectmen about things like that, acquisition of property like that when it becomes available, or at least kick the tires on how to get funding to purchase things like that.
As you know, Mr. Gibbs, we're in the process of doing a master plan, and actually last couple of weeks they had a workshop on recreation and open space, and I actually did bring this up at the last meeting, and they were very interested, the people from Serped, about the possibility of this land. And they mentioned that there are lots of grant opportunities out there, and this is a perfect time where we're doing the master plan to look into those sorts of things. They actually mentioned, too, our building commissioner, Bob Iafredi, was involved in the meeting as well. They also mentioned that sometimes if it's a land of particular interest from a conservation natural resource, there may be other state agencies, conservation agencies, that might be interested in purchasing it as well. So it might not necessarily mean that the town would have to actually be the purchaser. But I think perhaps we might want to, Bill Napolitano from Serped was at the meeting too, we might want to invite those Serped representatives to come in and maybe explore possibilities of grant funding that might tie in with the master planning project. So I think we're interested. If I speak as one person, certainly anything that can preserve some open space in our town is a good thing. So, gentlemen, anything else?
No, I'm fine with that. And I would just say, though, too, that we have hundreds of acres of open space in town, and I don't think that should be left unnoticed either.
Yes.
A lot of times people say we have no open space.
Right.
We have Borden Colony, which is about 165 acres, and virtually every subdivision in town has open space as part of their approval, whether it be Riverview Meadows, which has riverfront access on the Taunton River, to Cody Lane, which has about 60 acres of open space. So we have a ton of open space there, including a state forest.
Yeah, excellent point, Mr. Pacheco, and that was something that I was impressed at the meeting too. They were talking about the different areas, and I think part of it is an information effort that a lot of people in town don't realize people were saying they'd like to go on walking trails and so forth, that there are areas in town, and maybe part of what we can do through the master planning project is let people know about the
Correct.
resources that we do have.
Yeah, and the other piece too is I know Mr. Buckley's working on trying to obtain a trail grant for Borden Colony to expand access to that a little bit more as well. But I just want to make sure people don't leave this conversation thinking
No.
we have no open space in town, because that would be entirely inaccurate.
And that we certainly care about those things.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Mr. Shavo?
Yeah, just one comment, and that is that obviously the substance of this discussion tonight revolves around the particular property that this gentleman was talking about. So without that property being available, we really are talking in general. And the grants are obviously, they're in general too, based on finding a piece of property as great as the one that's been described. So I think we have to keep in mind that if that becomes available, that's something we move on. In the meantime, the search goes on.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Jerry. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, it's just
Oh, Christ.
one thing that's come out of those master plan meetings that should be, considered strongly is while we have some interesting land that we have access to, that people say there's no parking to get to those places, and that's been a big issue. For instance, the town forest, you have to park on Locust Street, and a place on South Main has no parking, although it has some picnic areas. So those are things that will come out of the master plan, I'm sure, and recommendations that I'm hearing in those master plan meetings, I'm sure will trickle down as well.
Very good. All right, thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it. Okay, let's see. That takes go up to Town Administrator's report. Mr. Waters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ongoing business, the May 17th annual town meeting warrant. I'm continuing to work with the departments to update their articles and prepare the warrant for closing and publication. This year's warrant will include capital items, including the public safety building requests by the school district. CARES Act expenses, reconciliation of COVID-19 expenses have been submitted to the state for reimbursement. A quick thank you to Lisa DeGacy, and apologize if I butchered her last name, and the accounting office for her assistance in sorting through the invoices and identifying the COVID-19 expenses. I will say that it's not the last of when we can submit for COVID-19 expenses. It's just without a permanent town accountant, the submittal and reconciliation falls on the town administrator. So as I get to them, I've been able to submit them. Lisa has been grateful enough or helpful enough to help me identify those invoices and expenses, and also assist me moving forward with entering those for reconciliation and reimbursement. The American Rescue Plan, this is the $1.9 trillion that was recently signed into law by the president. Of that $1.9 trillion, the town is receiving or is allocated to receive an estimated $1.4 million from the federal assistance. Funds may be used to replace revenue lost or reduced as a result of the pandemic, fund COVID-related costs, provide support to aid households and businesses impacted by the crisis, invest in economic recovery and renewal, and fund investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. The funds will be provided in 2 blocks in 2021 and 2022, and will be available for use through 2024. The Massachusetts Treasury Department will provide specific guidance on allowable uses of the funds and will determine final allocations based on the most recent census data and final language in the law. Additionally, which I did not include on my report, the CERT position has been posted. I'm working with the fire chief on the advertisement and the tying up the final job description. And then also would like to seek some guidance from the board on the part-time animal control officer that was recently vacated by Riley. Don't know if you'd like me to post that right away or wait for further discussion by the board.
Yeah, if I may.
Yeah, Mr. Shavo?
Yes, if I may. I think it would be appropriate to post that and look to fill that position. We have asked, and the board has approved, the Collins Center to do a study as to how we proceed going in the future. But in the meantime, I think it's prudent of us to post for that job and see what we can come up with. Certainly, as a transition, it would be, it'd make a lot of sense, especially as we approach the spring season, where this is the high level of activity for the ACO, positions. So I make a motion that we post that job and do what we can to fill it.
I would
If you
second
could
that.
hold on just a
Sure.
moment, gentlemen, we should probably first accept the resignation.
Sure.
So we have
Yeah,
a letter.
sorry.
Please
Yeah.
accept this letter as my formal resignation from the Assistant Animal Control Officer position effective Thursday, March 11th. I have greatly enjoyed my time in this role. However, due to some unforeseen changes in my family life, I accepted a full-time job, and that's Carrie Riley Morgan. Motion to accept?
With regret. Yep.
Yes.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. And now your motion,
My
Mr.
motion would be to
Chavez.
proceed posting the position for Assistant ACO under the same terms and conditions as applied to Riley, who has just resigned.
Second.
Any discussion?
None.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Continuing on, the next regularly scheduled Selectmen's meeting will be on Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021 at 7 p.m. right here in the Don McKinnon Meeting Room of Town Hall, 558 South Main Street, Rayhnam, Massachusetts. The public will be able to participate via GoToMeeting meeting platform or by watching the Raycam channel on Verizon, Comcast, or a recording posted later on YouTube. We have an upcoming Finance Committee meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. online. It's online only. Public participation instructions are located on the posted agenda. And then following that, the next day, we have a Capital Planning Committee meeting March 18th at 6:30 p.m. online via Zoom meeting platform. Public participation instructions are also located on that posted agenda as well. Madam Chair, that is all I have for my report, unless there's questions or comments by the board.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. Questions? Mr.
None, Madam
Pacheco.
Chair.
Mr. Shavo.
None, Madam Chair.
Next, we have Selectmen's report. Mr. Pacheco.
Yeah, I do. Just one brief thing, Madam Chair. I actually, believe it or not, received 2 calls about stimulus checks. I had no knowledge really on it, but I did some research, and I guess some people haven't got them yet. And outside of the obvious, which could be that you're not eligible because the eligibility changed, the income threshold was reduced to 80,000 max as opposed to, I believe it was up to 100,000 last time. I guess some banks process it differently, so it's a phased-in approach. So if folks haven't got a stimulus check yet, it's most likely one of those 2 things: a delay at your bank with processing, or the fact that potentially due to income you aren't eligible. So I just wanted to pass that along.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. Mr. Shavo.
None, Madam Chair.
Okay, I have nothing additional to add at this time either. So we have correspondence. The only other correspondence that we had is notification from Verizon New England that their contract expires on October 7th, 2023, and that 30 to 36 months prior to license expiration, they need to, I guess, begin the discussion of negotiations. So if we could refer this to the Cable Commission, and also Attorney August, we just appointed last week. And that, and the other thing was just our resignation, which we just did. So, press time. Anybody from the press wish to address us at this time?
Mike says we have something, Madam Chair.
Okay, press?
Oh, next one.
Next one, okay. First, we do emergency business. Mr. Pacheco.
None, Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Shavo. Okay. Citizen and community input. Please state your name and address for the minutes. *6.
If you're calling in by phone, you need to dial *6 on your phone to unmute yourself.
Dial *6 to unmute yourself if you're calling in on your phone.
Hi, this is Marsha, Sylvia.
Marsha Sylvia, Town Clerk, welcome.
Yep.
Hi, can you hear me okay? I'm on my cell phone, not my laptop.
We can hear you.
We can hear you fine, Marsha. Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was at the town hall until 7, and I certainly would have come in had I known that this was going to come up tonight. So I just wanted to since I heard about appointed town clerk, I just wondered if maybe since the pros for appointed town clerk were presented, I thought maybe I could just talk about some pros for elected town clerk. And I would be glad, just a few points.
Sure.
Because that was mentioned about appointed, and I would certainly be glad to either go into executive session with you or present something at a town meeting or a selectmen's meeting as well, more in depth, because I did not know that this was going to come up tonight.
Yeah, well, it was just part of the report. It wasn't, we didn't get into it in any great detail, Marcia, but if you want to
Right.
address it at this time, or we can certainly, it wasn't, just specifically on the agenda. There's no article or anything like that. It was just mentioned as one of certain positions that, could be considered. But if you want to take a few minutes to address it, please.
Sure, yeah. No, just a couple of things, because the pros for appointed was brought up. I just wanted to say that. One of the things, and this, first of all, this doesn't affect me because I'm going to retire, so this does not affect me what I'm going to say either tonight, or if it's brought up at a town meeting, I will gladly say something at town meeting. But one of the things I think to consider is maintaining voter rights. This political climate now, having just been through several elections, it's very important to maintain voters' rights. And I also think that an elected town clerk is directly accountable to the people who elect them, and at the will of the people, and not to a board of selectmen. And this is certainly nothing with this board of selectmen, or to a town administrator, and not directed to our town administrator. But an appointed town clerk is at the will of the selectmen and or town administrator, as opposed to an elected town clerk that is more independent. So I just, elected town clerks are familiar with the community. Just a few things I wanted to mention, just off the top of my head, because I thought it was important to bring that into the meeting tonight.
Sure. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Marcia. Any questions?
No, I always appreciate the clerk's valuable opinion and insight over many decades of service to the town.
Thank you. Mr. Sheva?
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the board at this time?
Mike is saying no.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Hi, Elizabeth Moran, the Director of the Council on Aging.
Yes, Liz, go right ahead.
Hi, I just wanted a clarification. Did you want to, as I understand it, did you want to have the clerical position remain at a clerical position, not as a clerk, not a senior clerk, and to start, because it's a new position, at the first step?
Yeah, so the union requires you to start at the first step when you don't have an incumbent in the position.
Right.
And it should be the clerk's position because that's what it was when the incumbent retired.
Correct.
So otherwise, it's 20 hours per week, the same as it was before on the first step, and going forward, that position will be filled.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, that was the vote, Liz, yes.
Okay. All right, because I'm having trouble hearing you, and so
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry that to wait this long, but I'm having trouble getting some transmission from you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, but no, we did vote to maintain the position that we have had, knowing that it's a really important position. Yes. Thank you, Liz.
All right. Thank you very much for your clarification.
You're very welcome. Anyone else wish to address us? Michael? Graham, do you
No,
see anybody
no.
out there? I think we're good. Okay, then continuing, let's see what we have left here. Performance of administrative duties. I'm looking for motion to approve the Town of Rainham invoice and payroll warrants dated March 16th, 2021.
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Mr. Shavo, second by Mr. Pacheco. Any discussion?
None.
Hearing none, all
Aye.
in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Motion to approve the Rainham Police invoice and payroll warrants.
So move.
Motion by Mr. Shavo. I will second that, and I'll call for a roll call vote. Mr.
Aye.
Shavo, Mr. Pacheco.
Present.
And I vote aye, so it's 2 in favor, 1 abstention. And I would now like to ask for a motion to go into executive session in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. The individual to be discussed in such executive session shall be notified in writing by the public body at least 48 hours prior to the proposed executive session. Do I have a motion?
So
And
moved.
also, no, will come out only to adjourn with no additional business to be conducted.
So moved.
Yeah,
Motion, second, roll call vote. Mr. Pacheco?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Shavo, chair votes aye. We are adjourned except for the executive session, and again, we will return only to adjourn with no additional business to be conducted. Thank you for joining us. Please have a great week. Stay safe, and by the way, happy St. Patrick's Day tomorrow.